Behind every successful endeavor in life is a relationship built on trust. Welcome to The Trust Doctor, restoring trust and enriching significant relationships. A podcast focused on helping you nurture healthy relationships. Join thought leader and world-renowned expert on relationship and empowerment coaching, Dr. Patty Ann, and her special guests every week for insightful and meaningful conversations filled with great takeaways that will help you build healthier business partnerships and happier romantic relationships. Are you ready to restore trust and enrich the significant relationships in your life? The Trust Doctor, Dr. Patty Ann, is in.
Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And do I have a treat in store for you today? So buckle up, folks, because Steve Scoggins is going to take us for a ride. Welcome, Steve.
What is going on? I'm super stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So listen, we can start with, the homeless to the bazillionaire, but why don't you tell us what challenges you face, because Lord knows there's been plenty of them. What's the greatest challenge that you faced that helped you get to where you are today, both business and personal?
Oh gosh, I think the most common denominator is going to end up being the power of living out a life lie. Here's what I mean by that. My father, who missed a huge chunk of my earlier childhood, he was kind of back in my life after my grandmother passed away when I was probably maybe 12 or 13 years old.
Well, where was he, Steve? Where was he in the early years?
Oh, he was just, unfortunately, he struggled with alcoholism. So he was back and forth to Colorado. And my mother, unfortunately, also, that she didn't deal with alcoholism, but she did deal with abuse and the after effects of PTSD and things of that nature. So both of them missed a huge chunk of my early part of my childhood because they were, I would say they were both in their process of healing. Very early stage. Very early stage, but they were both in that process. They
so much so they didn't even know they were in the process of
healing. Exactly. And they spent, they are great grandparents today. I'm very proud of the hard work that they put in. But I'll never forget this. My dad's business, his first business failed in the mid 90s. And I remember when his business failed, he looked over at me with tears in his eyes. And he says, I always want you to remember. I always want you to remember. I'm thinking it's going to be something powerful and something he said, Scoggins don't get ahead. They get by. Ooh. And I was like, this is my father. This is someone who's supposed to love me. Right. And, granted, when you're young, you don't realize what your parents are struggling with, right? They're just mom and dad. Right. And he says this to me. And I remember having this sinking feeling in my stomach. Now, coincidentally, for the next several years, we actually lived that out. We're losing our family home, losing the cars, repossessions, all that stuff, having to rent cars that buy here, what they call the rental car places on the weekends, or my dad got involved with the check cashing places. And
it actually wasn't a coincidence, right? That's what he believed.
It is.
So that's what he created.
Exactly. And then when I went on about my life, I was very fortunate. About 2 years later, my dad's employer, who had been trying to mentor my dad. My dad was hard of hearing when it comes to personal development, I guess. He came to my dad. I met him for the first time. He saw something in me I didn't see in myself. And I remember he used to pull me down off my dad's framing crew on a regular basis and put me in his Jeep Grand Cherokee. And he would ride me around the subdivision. And he would talk about flipping real estate. He would talk about staying away from alcohol. He would talk about, rich, people that are wealthy, they always invest in things that invest in more things. It's like this kind of like, he just poured in me on a regular basis. And I'll never forget this. It was a hot summer afternoon, still a teenager. And I remember it was so hot that I had sweat dripping off me everywhere. So when he motions me to come down and get inside of his Jeep Grand Cherokee, I'm like super excited because I'm like, AC, give me the AC, baby. Come on, give me the AC, right? And I get in the thing and I get in the car. He shuts the door. And I don't know what happened to Steve that particular day, but as soon as I enter the car.
Steve is your mentor's name.
Yeah, Steve Meyer.
You're not referencing yourself.
Exactly, correct. Yeah.
All right. Want to make sure we're not talking third person here. I'm not that smart. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm sitting there, and I'm sure you've dealt with this. where you can tell someone has something on their mind they want to cover with you, right? You know, the whole air of the little confinement kind of changed. And he looked at me dead serious. He goes, Stephen, what's the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And I was like, duh, it's money. Of course it's money. Everybody knows it's money. Like rich people have money, poor people don't have money. And he practically snapped at me. He said, absolutely not. It's the way they think. And you remember how earlier I mentioned the life lie that my dad mentioned? Steve did something very different. He turned that life lie into a question, in that he said, well, let me ask you this then. If being a person of wealth and stewardship and affluence is the way they think, let me ask you this. Do you want to think like me, or do you want to continue thinking like your father? Now, what happened in my head was this Rolodex of my dad borrowing, never repaying, my dad not being able to provide, for a family, even though he was working incredibly hard. Meanwhile, I'm having this other side of me that's watching Steve put $1,000 tips under baskets of hush puppies at little restaurants for single waitresses and all this kind of stuff. And it was the first time that I ever got stunned, and was also the first time that I knew I had a choice. Because up until that point, I'd always been told what I was supposed to be. Then if I managed to swing a hammer for $12 an hour and live in a single wide trailer that was a successful life.
Because you're getting by.
Exactly.
Others get by.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Steve's traveling the world. He's going on vacations. He's paying cash for things. He's being incredibly generous to the people around him. He's pouring into people like myself that, to this day, I had to ask his widow when he passed away in 2003, when I wrote my first book. I was like, why did Steve do that for me? Why? She said, well, he saw himself in you and your father, but you were the only one that would listen. So when I think about what is the major common denominator in life, business, relationships, all of that, it comes down to this knowability, or this knowing that I have a choice. I get to decide. I can decide to keep living like I've been living, or I can decide to think different, grow different, learn different, have amazing mentors like yourself, teach me something new and unique that I haven't thought about before, shift my perspective. And as a result, we both get to have a beautiful future. So I think that's the end of the day. That's it.
We all have a choice, and we can choose happiness, right? You don't seek happiness. Happiness doesn't find you. COVID's a great example, right, Steve?
Yeah.
Everybody's faced with the same lemon.
Yeah.
You're going to make lemonade, or you're going to moan and groan. So you're either the victor or the victim, and you chose to be the victor, clearly. So I have another question for you. I'm dying to know the answer to this question, because every single thing that I know about you, everything I've ever read, watched, everything talks about you quoting somebody that quoted to you what arguably the wisest man on the planet, King Solomon, said. This too shall pass. I can remember my mother-in-law. I can remember my mother. I can remember people I love and care about saying that to me when I'm young, and I think the world's going to end over. Who knows why? But it's really just a blip on the screen. Tell us a little bit about why that was also a pivotal moment for you and got you to where you are today, because it sounds like Steve having that mentor, and there's nothing like that relationship, but it sounds like there was something about this too shall pass that resonated with you, that changed your life.
Yeah, I think it's when you think about it, and I agree that King Solomon was pretty stinking wise. He was also pretty stinking wealthy, come to think of it. Go figure. Anyway,
maybe it goes a little hand in hand, right?
Yeah, right. It's the way they think. It was an interesting season. I've already kind of mentioned, so I'd have to kind of go backwards to go forward just a little bit.
Sure.
In that, at 9 years old, my grandmother is raising me at the time. And at 9 years old, I literally have a G.I. Joe in one hand, a Transformer in the other. And they're having a battle royale. Snake Eyes is beating.
Just so you know, for my listeners, Steve is dating himself, but go ahead. G.I. Joe, Transformers, I know what they are. Game Boy too, right?
That's right. But I remember her looking at me in the eyes and saying she was going to need help around the house. And what I didn't know was she was about to teach me how to cook and clean, boil water, and do stuff. And I'm 9 years old. Like your mental acuity at 9 is like, what cartoon am I going to watch?
Exactly.
Right. That's the starting point behind a lot of adversity followed by that. Growing up super fast, super early, being relied upon to provide and give to other people, being relied upon to make an active role in fast forwarding out of youth into some level of adulthood. And that trend continued all the way until my late teens, almost into my 20, 21 years old. Now it continued a lot of different ways. I mentioned that Steve, had poured into me and all this kind of stuff and all that, which is all true and good, but I didn't take action on hardly any of it. It just kind of, it was that old adage, in one ear and out the other, right? So I kind of had one of these moments where I was kind of going through that. And it was my junior year in high school. Our lights get cut off for the umpteenth time. Wake up to cold water because we had boil water, so the water would pump, but you couldn't warm it, right? And I finally had enough. We didn't have a family car. So I walked in, because I'd been held back in 5th grade, I was able to walk into my junior year and pretty much just drop out of school. Now I dropped out of school, went immediately into working in the work life, going back to that provider, right? I have to provide, right? I have to help my dad. And we had this old adage that I think is another lifeline, which is family helps family. Mm-hmm. Family helps family get smarter, not do dumb, right? Kind of thing.
Not to repeat dumb patterns, right?
Exactly. But in this particular situation, that's what I was doing. I helped us get it, solidify, I went to a buy here, pay here lot, helped us get a car, got the family stable. And I moved out when I was 17 and never looked back. Well, on the surface, you're like, okay, well, that's good. I mean, that seems like at least you're taking action. It's not the course of trajectory that we're taught we need to take by going to school and doing all these other things. And it's definitely a harder lifestyle doing it that way. But I ended up finding myself in an environment where I never could get a sense of identity and purpose. I never really could get a sense of meaning. I felt like I was just working and striving, but I wasn't really sure.
Just going through the motions, working for the man, whatever that meant.
Yeah, exactly. And as I'm going through that, I just know there's something more. Well, I decided I wanted to go try to join the military because I figured, they're going to feed me. I get to travel the world and they're going to pay me and I'm not gonna have anything to spend money on. So I can save a bunch of money and get myself out of all this trouble.
And women like men in uniforms, but that's an aside.
It turns out that's
or they used to. I don't know.
So we're
talking to someone from has military family. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I hang all my hopes and my dreams. I already had several environments where I couldn't make ends meet. I was basically just reliving the same thing that my dad had always told me. And so I worked my butt off 6 months straight, 8 months straight. I'm busting my hump. I'm scuba diving on a regular basis because I wanted to be a SEAL. I'm carrying logs. I'm doing all this weird stuff that most people wouldn't do. And lo and behold, I go to actually ship out, and it's supposed to go to the Great Lakes up in Michigan for my boot camp. I get to MEPS, and I walk in the door, and I'm sitting down. And they had these little high school table kind of things where you kind of scoot your butt in the sideways to kind of sit down.
Yeah.
And I'm there with, half a dozen other people or whatever. And we all got duffel bags. Some are going to the Marines, some are going to the Navy, so on and so forth. Well, out of the blue, this guy comes up to me. Hey, Scoggins, come here. Scoggins, here, come here. And I go to get up. He's like, no, grab your bag. Come on. And ultimately, inevitably, what happens is he brings me up. We go into another room. He sits me down and says, like, look, I'm sorry. You're not going to be, we can't let you enlist. And you have to understand in this time and age, and when that moment happened, the military was practically taking everyone that showed up. Right. I mean, I'm serious. There was something going on with the military. They were building it up or whatever. And, and here it is another time where he's, I learned that I have scoliosis at the top of my neck. I learned because I had a GED at the time that my ASVAB score had to be higher than it would have had to been if I had a high school diploma. Mm-hmm. And he's like, between the two, you're not only can you not enlist, you can't enlist next year, 6 months from now, whatever. We think you're going to have medical conditions, all this kind of stuff. Right.
So it's basically game over.
Yeah, it's game over. That's actually a really good way to put it. Yeah, I felt game over. Mm-hmm. Right. Because I had worked my butt off. I had dropped out of school to take care of my family. I had tried to take care of my grandmother when I was growing up. I had tried to solve my own financial needs and stuff by outworking my circumstances. I had tried all these different things. This was my last ditch effort.
Yeah, you couldn't work any harder.
Exactly. I couldn't do anything. There was nothing else. And as I walk out the door, I just knew something was up. And by the time the door actually closed behind me, the glass door closed behind me, I started weeping so hard that literally I could not see through the actual, see through my eyes. I don't know if you ever been with those rainstorms where it's just raining so hard in the windshield, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
Well, I was raining exactly that hard. I was kind of going through it as hard as I possibly could. And as I was walking through that moment, I just remember hearing all these voices, so to speak, not audible voices, but feeling these things of, you ever seen the angel and the devil thing that you have when you go watch one of the Looney Tunes episodes?
Yeah.
I legit exactly. Well,
don't eat it. Don't eat it.
It's like, but that's exactly what I felt like. The only difference is, and this is something that's pretty profound that I felt, is the little devil on my shoulder, right, was telling me how worthless I was, how I didn't matter, how I was a burden, how I was a loser how God didn't create me to make me something special. And I was, in that, all that life lie stuff, Scoggins don't get ahead, they get by. So why try? Right. All this kind of garbage. And meanwhile, I felt like I had this other little piece of me that was whispering and was basically saying, that's not true. You can be more. You can do more. You can go all this kind of stuff. Well, that battle waged inside my mind and my heart for
because
another.
The angel was whispering. The other one was louder.
Exactly.
The negative was louder.
And negative. And the profound thing is I've learned that opportunity always whispers, and negativity always shouts.
Say that again.
Opportunity always whispers. Negativity always shouts.
Awesome.
The limiting beliefs that you currently occupy your mind, your heart, and your soul will always provide themselves louder than an opportunity around the corner that maybe you're not seeing just yet. It takes
because the world presents in a place of scarcity.
Exactly. But I've continued that battle as I'm walking up, and I found myself overlooking an 8-lane highway at Capitol Boulevard and 440. It's funny, I go under that bridge or over that bridge, several times a year nowadays.
And now it's got your name on it because you own it.
Yeah, I guess. And I just, I was going through it and just, I just found myself, and I was legitimately thinking that truck right there, that's too small. That won't do enough. This truck's too big. Maybe that'll do too much. Like contemplating how I was going to make this happen, if that makes any sense.
Okay. But you didn't say you're assuming we know, make what happen?
Well, and the only way I can explain it was my aspiration in that moment was to end the suffering and end the pain. So suicide. And I was going to do that by ending my life. Mm-hmm. And as I sat across that bridge, it was a chilly night. I could still remember the breath escaping my mouth. Like I'd breathe out and watch the smoke kind of go out. I can still remember the smell of diesel fumes. I can remember the cars honking. I can remember feeling so isolated and so alone that I thought that was my only choice. And that little whisper, if you will, turned out to be kind of a divine encounter for me specifically. That little whisper said, well, at least call people and tell them you love them. And it just so happens that my grandmother had given me a broken Nokia 5160 cell phone with a cracked yellow screen so I could call her when I got to boot camp, right, to let her know I was okay. And I picked up the phone. I dialed a number, got a busy signal, dialed another number, busy signal, dialed another number, got an answering machine message. Yes, an answering machine is the big box that used to sit beside the phone in the house that you'd push play on, right?
But you had to be home for it.
Exactly. And every time I would try to dial a new number and I would fail, that voice of failure, that voice of it's never going to work, it's never going to do this, all of this kind of stuff would come back up, and it kept getting louder and louder and louder, all the way to the point where I finally kicked off my shoes and I was going to push myself off. And that little whisper said, try one more time. Just try one more time. And literally, I don't know if you've ever had this thing happen where you pick up the phone and it's like the other person's already on the line before you even have a chance to pick up. They just pick up the phone and they're already there.
Yeah. But I believe that's energy. Yeah. I think that's energy. Like we're sending, she felt you.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Or somebody felt you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely, it was crazy because, I remember picking up the phone. I remember her old raspy cigarette voice already being there. Right. And she's like, and she doesn't miss a beat. Where are you at? What's going on? What are we going to do? Like she knew that I was in more trouble than I was letting myself know I was in instinctively. Mm-hmm. And the woman on the other line her name was Susan Batts. She passed away from breast cancer in 2016. Unfortunately, her nickname was Mama Wama. She was my high school girlfriend's mother.
Okay. High school girlfriend's mother. Got it.
Who, like Steve, well, every time she got around me, she would talk life into me. She would speak life over me. She would remind me that I wasn't my circumstance. I was the culmination of opportunity. She had a love for me that you can only feel with a mother's love, right? And I'm not saying my mother didn't love me, but my mother just wasn't present in that time. And here was this woman who I wasn't biologically hers. She'd watched me go through a breakup with her daughter after thinking we were going to, end up soulmates and everything all together and all this kind of stuff. And she was, you got to tell me where you're at. I'm coming to get you, da, 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 da. And I don't know if it went on for an hour or 10 hours or whatever, but I was, combative, like, no, you don't need to do that. I'm fine. You're not fine. And then she finally got me to actually mention or to concede that I would actually call her at 9 a.m. the next morning, which was a battle for her, by the way, because that meant I would have to get off the bridge, go somewhere else, and pick up the payphone to the next day to call her.
She made you accountable to someone that you cared about, that believed in you more than yourself. And she the life that she breathed into you is she was a lover of life.
Amen to that.
She loved everybody. But go ahead, finish the story.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sitting there and we're going through that, and then I'll never forget this. I get tingles every now and again when I tell the story. But just before we hang up, she says, "Stephen, I want you to repeat after me." I'm like, "Repeat after me?" I'm like, what? Just do it. Yes, ma'am. Right? She says, "This too shall pass, and what comes next will be greater." And I was like, "Dad, say it," she says. I said, "Well, this too shall pass, and what comes next will be greater." Say it like you mean it. It's like I went to boot camp already. Right? I'm serious. So she was screaming at me. She was screaming.
Well, it sounds like she knew what was at stake.
Yeah, I know that she did. I found that out years later when I was able to connect with her again. But
she was fighting for your life when you couldn't fight for your life.
Yeah, I was utterly exhausted and empty. And I remember screaming those words at the top of my lungs. I remember having a sense of emotional release that I can't fully explain. And within a week's time frame, I was back on a crew with Steve Myrick. I was pulling lumber out of a trash pile to build scaffolding to do a second chance of something that I screwed up to begin with. And that became the first day of one of my businesses that's now one of my flagship companies that does over 8 figures in revenue. The reason I say that is because I think sometimes you have to really conquer or confront your darkness in order to actually appreciate the light, to appreciate the opportunity, to appreciate what could happen, what could be, the power within it. And it has become a battle cry. I put "this too shall pass, and what comes next will be greater" in my first book a number of years ago. And I got people that wrote to me all over the place that those words meant something to them. And I think it's easy for us as human beings to get lost in the moment, not realizing it's a blip on the radar screen.
Exactly.
So,
and we're, stay humble, because we're just a blip in the universe also.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So take us now, Steve, for the listeners, take us from someone that grew up with a traumatic childhood being an understatement, on the precipice of ending their life, to who you are today. I read somewhere that you said your first company, which is what you just referenced, right? The construction company, that's 8 figures, count them, 8, right? People can only dream that. And you said your first company, what did you say, taught you how to build with your hands, that led to build with your head, that followed how to build with your heart. Absolutely. So those are great platitudes, if you will, right? But can you operationalize them for us? What is it that got you, as you say, from stuck to unstoppable? Because clearly on some level, when you didn't believe in yourself, you found the right people. And I don't think that just happens, right? You had that little whisper. Somebody just had to amplify it for you. Yeah. So how does somebody else do that?
For me, the first thing that I had to do is just open myself up that possibilities were in fact possible. Right. And when you've been
How did you do that? How did you do that?
Well, I think the way that I did that was I would replay those words that we just hit, like "this too shall pass, and what comes next to be great." Because it wasn't like a rocket ship rise, right? I still grinded it out for over 20 years to get to the business of this size. There were times when I didn't know if I was going to make payroll. There were times I didn't know if I was going to lose a customer, gain a customer. defeat a competitor in the marketplace that was trying to take over my market, or there's all these different things that happen in life and in business. And I just felt like that if I would just kept going, it would work out. Now, some would call that faith. I call it faith. It's one of the attributes of faith. So I think there's this element of possibilities are always wrapped up on the other side of faith, right? So being able to own and be present in the thing that you don't know, or the unknown, and being okay to have that nervous energy, to know that you're going to have to work on you in order to excel you. With the construction company a long time ago, I was asked a number of years ago, why is that business successful? Like, we had COVID, this last couple of years. We've had the market, the 2000 during downturn that my company shot up in size and scale during that time frame. None of that makes logical sense. How? Why? And outside of my faith, I would say that one of the things that comes up all the time is I realized that I wasn't really operating or building a construction business. I was actually building a personal development company masquerading as a construction business. You see what I'm saying? And as I was doing that, it became really viable for me to try to emulate the people in whom I admired most. And that's where I started. I tried to emulate Steve. I tried to emulate Susan. I tried to emulate Dave and Dave Ramsey a number of years later. And then my good friend, Evan. And I tried to emulate these people that I admired and respected, that I felt like I could trust their character and trust their integrity. And when I didn't know what to do, I would just do what they did.
So so you didn't reinvent the wheel. And I think for all entrepreneurs, it's not a straight line, and you have to, if you want to grow, especially as an entrepreneur, what you just said, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and in today's world, with everything changing so rapidly, COVID, whatever it is, if you stay still, you are falling behind.
Yeah.
And what you said about the personal development company, I love, because, I always say all success is based upon the ability to create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's in your business. Business is 80% people, 20% product or service.
Yep.
So having said that, so you are where you are today, but I believe that you've faced some challenges in your business partnerships.
For sure.
So I work with business partners all the time, right? So what can you share that will help people through those times? Perhaps lessons you've learned that when you look back on it now, if I knew then what I know now, what you may or may not have done differently.
Well, there's one major mistake that I made in building businesses, that was at the direct root of a bunch of other things that would break or fall apart or not be reliable, including some of the people that I had in my business working for me a number of years ago. And that was I tried to build a business without building myself. And as a result, I would operate out of fear. I would operate out of insecurity. Here's a high school dropout who's owning and running a multi-million-dollar business, who has people with MBAs, CPAs, ABCs, EFGs, everything under the sun, like reporting to them, right? And that instinctively, that they've got the street cred, they've been to school, they've got the degrees, they've done all this kind of stuff, but yet they're looking to you for leadership. They're looking for you for advice. They're looking for you to play an active role as an owner, founder, CEO, but no one's ever taught you how to do that. Well, what do? Well, you cover up your insecurities by being defensive, not listening well, not taking ideas, being combative, and it all comes from that place of fear. Like if I really let them know who I really am and I don't really know what I'm doing, they're going to leave me, which brings up the abandonment phase. And I find that all leaders go through this transitionary season where everything about the business is about them, where soon everything about the business is about others. And the only way you get there is by continuing to develop yourself. And basically, one of the practices that I have, tactical practices that I do even today, is anytime I have the ability or capacity to accept the affirmation or the blessing or the credibility from some achievement that the company's done, the first thing that I do is I try to select people that I can give that credibility and that affirmation and those things to. So we just got an award for X, Y, and Z. It'd be easy as the owner. Well, yes, I'm the owner and I'm so awesome. And yes, feed me, Seymour, feed me. Right. And when I've learned that in times past where I've done that a number of years ago, the people who are ultimately following are like, dude, I helped you do it. What's going on? And what I've learned is if you really want to build a well-oiled machine and a strong team that is unified and brought together, then you have to put yourself in a position where you are giving away the achievements, but then taking on a responsibility. So when my company's not doing well, it's my fault, right? It's not, our processes and systems aren't that person's fault necessarily. Well, because who trained them? Who hired them? Well, it turns out I hired a lot of them, kind of thing. And
you're the captain of the ship. You're the captain of the ship.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't lead where you're not willing to go.
Exactly. And was it John Maxwell, a good friend, says,
That's exactly who I was thinking
the law
of.
of the
And the
lead,
law of the lid. The law of the lid. Exactly.
That's right. And the scalability of your organizations is going to be directly tied to the scalability of yourself.
Sure.
So if you don't have a reinforceable routine on a daily basis about learning something new, doing something new, stretching yourself on a regular basis, you will slide into comfortability. And it may be comfortable for a little while. But meanwhile, there's another hungry Stephen Scoggins out there, another hungry Evan Carmichael or a Bo Hawkins, right? There's another hungry person who's coming in who's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And some of these people have huge chips on their shoulders like I used to, where I got something to prove. Now,
talk about authenticity.
Sure. Well, I mean, what you see is what you get, right? Like with me, if I'm frustrated, you know it. If I'm happy, you know it. If I'm contemplative, you know it. I think in order to be authentic, one of the number one things you've got to do is you have to be honest with yourself. And most of us aren't.
Correct.
Most of us are not honest with ourselves. Most of us, we judge ourselves by our intentions, but yet we take negative actions or counterintuitive actions to those intentions. We self-sabotage ourselves because we're scared. We feel alone. We might feel abandoned. Like there's all these different things that you have to confront. And for me, the authenticity side comes directly from trying to be honest with myself. And I start with the things I know I need to improve upon.
So let me ask you a question about that. And hopefully we can bring this full circle back to the business partners, because most entrepreneurs has a business partner story. When we're authentic and genuine, that also makes us vulnerable. And many leaders, many owners don't want to be vulnerable. So help us with that.
Well, I wish I could tell you I'm a case study for how to do it correctly. I did it wrong.
We can all learn from everyone's mistakes. So that's great.
Yeah. I mean, I just, about 10 years into my business, 12 years into my business, I built a successful organization. I had a team of people who I felt like were my brothers and sisters in arms, only to find out that 3 days before, or the night before a live event I was supposed to teach for 3 days straight, that they wanted to take my business out from under me. And as a result, I have to stop what I'm doing. I have to shut down lock all the computer programs out, all this kind of stuff. And that proceeded to become a 1.5 year struggle to not necessarily rebuild my business as much as it was, but understand the depth of the malfeasance that had taken place. I had
you were totally blindsided, Steve, totally blindsided.
I was, because I have a huge heart. Like I believe the best in people, even if they're not necessarily acting. And it forced me to take
Ronald Reagan, trust but verify.
That's right. Well, and exactly. And then, it forced me to take my blinders off. It forced me to start looking at the nuances. It forced me to start saying, well, if that person will lie about that, they'll lie about something bigger.
So what do you think you missed when you look back on that, right? Like whenever anyone's been betrayed, you were betrayed in a marriage, in a business partnership, after the initial shock, and there's shock. If we try to learn, regroup, right? Do a debrief. Usually we miss something. What do you think you missed?
Well, I missed two things. The first thing that I missed is totally on me, which is I missed the ability to treat those people correctly early stage. What I mean by that is when I told you I was going through that growth curve of trying to operate as a secure leader versus an insecure leader, they got a huge brunt of the insecure leader, the growling, the tenacity, the extra grit, the extra drive, the extra push. And high tank being 2020, that's my responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I opened up the door for them to feel like maybe Stephen doesn't really care about me and he's only in it for himself.
So they were working for you, not with you.
Yeah, correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. What they did differently is I made the mistake. I went through a divorce about a year earlier than that, as I made the mistake of giving my management team complete access to my financial data. Right. So my balance sheets, they saw some profit and loss statements and things like that, but I gave them complete carte blanche access to things that normally you wouldn't share as a CEO and owner. It would be shared with shareholders, but not necessarily just you. And when I did that, they saw dollar signs.
Why did you do that? What made you do that?
I think because I felt like I was fighting a war on two fronts. It was very difficult for me to be in a very toxic divorce situation and also be a very present business leader and an owner. And try as I might, I felt like my emotional energy kept drawing me towards the divorce and towards my former wife's emotional traumas and things that she was working with that caused a lot of the stuff. And as a result, I just didn't have the emotional fortitude or the emotional capacity to really pour myself out in two different places at the same time. So I was like, well, look,
you were exhausted. I don't know.
I was exhausted.
You were exhausted. You only had so much energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was, hey guys, I really could use your help. I got all this going on. Would you guys please help me? Yeah. We got you. Yeah.
So it was misplaced trust.
Exactly.
You gave people trust that weren't trustworthy.
It turned out that to be the case. We literally uncovered $1.4 million we can't account for. We weren't able to prosecute to the way in which we would hope to.
To this day, you can't account for it?
Exactly. Yep. They went out to start a competitive company later on. Their company has not done as well as the flagship kind of thing. But at the end of the day, one of the things that it taught me specifically, the thing that I missed was the accountability in the ordinary.
I love that. Tell me more about that.
So the accountability in the ordinary is nothing more than when they had a chance to have character, they did or didn't. When they had a chance to do the right thing, they did or didn't. When they had a chance to earn a significant bonus or give some of that bonus to other team members around them that needed the money, they took the money for themselves, right? You can see greed, ambition, breaks in character if you're just looking for it. And I have my blinders on, and I feel like a lot of folks.
Steve, you know what I thought of as you were speaking? The book, Everything I Need to Know in Life I Learned in Kindergarten.
Yeah. They
failed the kindergarten test.
Yeah.
Character, integrity, be kind, share.
Yeah.
F.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I mean, that's accountability in the ordinary. Like I to this day have been put in positions where I could technically make more money, excel faster if I just cut this corner and I just cut this corner and I just cut that corner. And I've decided that if I have to cut a corner to get there, it's not for me. And
it sounds like you're cutting it sounds like you would feel you're cutting a piece of your heart.
Yeah.
If you
I mean, I was more brokenhearted about the morning. And and this is true because these people some of them were with me 12, 15 years, right? They were with me from the early days all the way through the very successful days.
Yeah. Et tu, Brutus.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just going through it and trying to figure everything out. But I mean, I had to mourn the loss of the people that I thought were my family.
Mm-hmm. And how clearly time and time again, you pick yourself up from that. Mm-hmm. So what would you like to share with the listeners? What's some of the skills, the nuggets, the takeaways, the actions that they can do so that when life throws them a curveball, they'll be able to hit it out of the park like you did? I wish I knew a hockey analogy, but all I know is checking. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's all good. I think all right. So there are two practical things. One has to do with purpose. Mm-hmm. If you have a clear purpose, then you can suffer through much any pain. Mm-hmm. Okay. And my purpose, and I discovered this by watching Steve and watching Susan and watching so many of my mentors before me, is that the greatest purpose in life you'll ever have is serving the person you used to be.
Your former self, as Ben Hardy calls it.
Exactly. The second thing that I think has to do with perspective. And perspective says that if I'm going to make a meaningful impact and have a meaningful life, then what I leave behind is just as important, if not more important than what I had when I was here. Mm-hmm. And I look at that in the form of legacy. So I like to say that the greatest thing or the greatest legacy you'll ever have is the one that outlives you. Right. I talk about Steve, Myrick, and Susan all the time on interviews and things of that nature. And they've both passed away a long time ago. And I talk about the wisdom and the nourishment and things of that they got. And here at the culmination of both of those, one of the things that gets me back up when I get knocked back down, and I'm like anybody else, I still have days I'm like, is this really for me? I don't know. Maybe I should give up. And then somehow the next day I do it anyway, and it works out. Right. And you begin to build momentum. But the interesting pivot is it's not about you in the first place. It's not about you. If my whole ambition in life was based on, well, build as big a business as you possibly can, collect as much money as you possibly can, and that's the extent of my life here on earth, then I've totally missed out. I've totally screwed it up. However, if I focus on taking that which is painful for me that I have to overcome, and then pulling the lessons out of that to then give those to someone else at maybe an earlier stage than when I had it, now I've got significance and meaning. Viktor Frankl calls it, what does he say?
Man's search for meaning.
Yep. Man's search for meaning.
I was thinking about that as you were speaking, the purpose.
When suffering has its meaning, it ceases to be suffering.
Exactly.
But the trick is getting out of that moment of suffering. And if you're so focused on the pain, you can't be focused on the possibility. So why not focus on the possibility to move through the pain quicker? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if we do that consistently, then we're going to understand something very, very clear, something very, very powerful, which there is no transformation, whether it be business or relationship or whatever, no transformation whatsoever without a super degree of transparency. Mm-hmm. Being honest with yourself, knowing that you need to grow continually, never having it all figured out. And I find that people who stay stuck the longest, one of the number one things that they do more than anything else, and I did this myself, was I would try to convince myself and other people that I already had it figured out. I already knew it, right? I joke around with my son all the time. I said, man, I'll be glad when you're not 19 and you actually go to 20 or something like that. He's like, why? I said, when you go from being a teenager, you finally won't know everything. Kind of thing. So
the older our children get, the smarter we become.
Yep. And them too, thank God.
And them too. And okay, what's the legacy that you want to leave behind? What's your legacy, Steve? Your purpose, you said, is to serve, if I heard you correctly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
right out of John Maxwell.
I think a quick story. I've got stories for days. I'll make it super clear.
Don't be quick. Take your time.
Steve Myrick, I got to meet his granddaughter after a number of years of not seeing her for a long time. And she came to my live event center here in Raleigh. I have a live event center where I have, a stage and studios and all this kind of stuff. And she came here and she's walking around the building, and I'm showing her, introducing her team members and all this kind of stuff. And she's so enthralled. She goes, my granddaddy is all over this place. I said, yeah, he is. His quotes, the team saying stuff to her that Steve used to say to her and other people, like in a variety of different ways. And on the way out the door, we had this very interesting, really cool thing happen. About that time, one of my team members on my team came up, and he's trying to leave the building, and she's leaving the building. And I stopped him because it's a young man that I've been trying to pour into. You've just been young, trying somebody like, I see something in you. I'm going to pour into you a little bit. And so I go to say, well, hey, Connor, this is Steve Myrick's granddaughter. And then I'm like introducing him and stuff like that. And she goes, well, what do you do here? She goes, well, he goes, well, I do this, and this for this business. And she goes, oh, that's so awesome. And she goes, so what do you want to do with your life? He goes, well, I just want to make a difference. And he goes, well, what do you mean you want to make a difference? Well, I want to make a difference like he's making in my life. See, he's my Steve Myrick. So when you ask me what my legacy will be, I want to be a Steve Myrick for as many people as humanly possible before I leave this earth. I don't even need him to talk about me when I'm gone. I just need to make a difference and give them hope, aspirations, and empowerment to help them get to another level that they honestly don't think they can get to, but I know they can. I know they can.
Awesome. So what is a misconception people have about you that they have, and you choose not to correct it for whatever reason? So here's your chance.
Man, misconception.
They think they know this about you, but you're really not like that.
Yeah, it's changed in recent months. But for a long time, people thought that I had extensive degrees. because of how I do business with people. They thought that some of what I've accomplished has been, given to me, or it was government funded. I got help from somebody or whatever. And it's always been bootstrap. Right. And as a result, there's a certain, a level of people looking at me from time to time and says, well, of course he was successful. He had it all given to him or taken care of. And the misconception is I'm like any other everyday entrepreneur who wants a better life, who wants to do better by people, and who just fought and clawed and refused to give up. And I feel like if you're an entrepreneur, you're a leader, and you're not where you want to be, you just got to keep fighting. You got to keep fighting. And I feel like that's probably the strongest one for me.
Great. So isn't that interesting when somebody's successful, people, they really don't understand everything that's behind it and the work it takes. So they assume that it was given to you because they're not willing to do the work today that will give them what you have that they won't have tomorrow. All right. That is great. What if I have another question for you before we stop? And this is so great. And I so appreciate your time and your honesty, your transparency, right? If you were to be a lead actor or actress in any role on Broadway, who would you want to play and why?
I want to be the guy that did the greatest show, the ringleader, the guy with the top hat.
Barnum?
Yeah, I want to be him.
PB something. I'm in Connecticut. I think he was actually up in Hartford, Connecticut here.
Yeah, I love
Barnum
the story. I love the story of.
What's the story that you love? What resonates with you?
Possibilities for somebody who's willing to dream.
That's
I like any hero story that somebody just took a chance to dream, and no matter what came at them, how it came at them, no matter what happened, they held on to that dream like it was their golden ticket to life, because it was.
So what's your secret to that empowerment?
My secret is just believing it's possible. Again, it goes all the way back.
Hashtag believe.
Yeah, exactly. Hashtag believe. Everything goes all the way back to the very beginning of our conversation, right? Where Steve said, what's the difference between this and this? Right. And it's always how you think, how you view it, how you see it, how you work on it, how you go after it, whether or not you go after it. Do you give up when it gets tough, or do you continue to fight? And all of those are many micro choices. And if we're going to win at life, win at business, win at relationships, we are going to have to do the hard thing. And you have to do the hard thing before the easy things come. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And, Steve told me a long time ago, he said, you have to be willing to do today what others won't, so you can have tomorrow what others don't.
That's what I was trying to say before. Thank you. That's why you're the rock star.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Compliment. Gosh, you're awesome.
So Steve, what's the information you would love to leave with our listeners today that I didn't ask you about because I don't know enough to ask you, or I don't have that prism into your breadth of experience? What would you like to leave people with that will enable them, empower them to believe in themselves now, maybe more so than they did when we started this podcast?
I think the message that I would leave is there's more at stake than you think there is. There's more at stake when you think there is. One of the things that motivates me is I know that life is not after me. Life is after the generations that are hidden inside of me, right? We're in an environment in a day and time where, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, our country is more divided than it's ever been. We've got people who don't communicate more than they've never communicated before.
Wait, yelling isn't communicating?
not necessarily, unless you're really far.
Thank you for clarifying that.
But there's this essence of, I think we've forgotten what it's like to just be real with one another. And because we've forgotten what it's like to be real with one another, we can't understand one another. And because we can't understand one another, we can't sympathize with one another. And I find that most of the opportunities in life that I've had in business and everything have come through being honest, vulnerable, and transparent with people, and then finding your tribe along the way, finding those people that share those same common values, and then building something special with them and moving forward. So I think it's going to come down to making sure you're paying attention, making sure you're doing the right thing, and making sure you're becoming the right person. And
that from what you're saying, you are your North Star. Nobody else sets that for you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Great.
No parents, nobody. Like you, as far as we know, this is the only life that you get to live on Earth. As far as we know.
As far as we know.
Figure that something else maybe is different, but
yeah, it's not a
as far
dress
as we know,
rehearsal.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Why shortchange yourself? Why not go for it? Why not see how far you can go? I'm not saying that far you go is just like how much stuff you can buy. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how big of an impact can you make? And it starts with the one, right? It starts with impacting yourself so you can then impact others.
Right. You put a stone, you throw it in a lake, and you have that ripple effect.
Exactly.
So, Steve, thank you so much. This was so awesome. I know the listeners learned so much from you. I learned so much from you. I feel like I'm unstoppable now. So if you've been stuck and you're now unstoppable, we have Steve Scoggins to thank. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. And remember, if you like this podcast, make sure you like, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Once again, we've concluded another great episode of The Trust Doctor with Dr. Patty Ann. Tune in next week for more insights and advice on how you can create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. To find out more about the podcast, visit drpattyann.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Until next time.